Joining me now is Miriam Baer. She's a professor of law at Brooklyn Law School and a former assistant U.S. attorney in the criminal division of the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Southern District of New York. And Rebecca Roiphe is a professor of law at New York Law School and a former assistant district attorney in the New York County District Attorney's Office. Ladies, welcome to you both. A lot to get through. Let me start with you, Miriam. What would a prosecutor need to successfully argue a case that the president violated campaign finance law?
Well, first of all, we'd want to make sure that we're able to prove that those payments that were made to those two women, again through intermediaries, was actually connected to the election, right? If it was just simply, I don't want my wife to find out about an affair, then we know that that would not be a campaign violation. So first, that's the first thing we're looking for. And then the second thing we'd be looking for, particularly if you want to prove this as a crime, is you have to show what's called willfulness. And willful is an interesting word in criminal law because it can mean different things. But in this context, we often are looking for evidence that the person understood they were violating the law, or at the very least were doing something wrongful. So usually what you look for are efforts to cover up what you're doing, because if you're covering up what you're doing, then obviously you're aware you're doing something wrong and violating the law. So those are the things you'd look for. Now here, if you're looking for conspiracy, which is what we look at when we have more than one person doing the various things, you'd be looked to see if there was an agreement, right? So you don't have to have done all these various things. If you agreed that someone else would, for example, pay someone, that's perfectly fine to prove that you were part of the illicit agreement.
And based on what we know, Rebecca, do we have a sense of how strong that kind of case might be?
I think that our sense of how strong it is just got stronger because now we have the Department of Justice actually saying that Michael Cohen acted at the direction of the president, not just Michael Cohen saying that. So I think this case got much stronger. Still, he could argue the defenses that Miriam suggested, but I think it suggests that the Department of Justice has some information that we don't know about regarding his intent and regarding the purpose of those payments.
Well, I want to play what former FBI Director James Comey had to say in a Q&A session on Sunday. Let's listen to that.
Is the President of the United States right now an unindicted co-conspirator?
I don't know. Not in the formal sense that he's been named in an indictment where you can actually say that this defendant and named others or others by pseudonym conspired together, and that's how you formally name someone as an unindicted co-conspirator. But if he's not there, he's certainly close, given the language in the indictment, in the filing, that the crimes were committed at his direction.
So what is your thought on that, Miriam? Do you agree with Comey's assessment there? And what exactly is a conspirator, co-conspirator?
So first of all, what Comey is referring to is the fact that Mr. Trump is referred to as individual one. He's not referred to in the filing as CC1 or co-conspirator one. So it's possible to do that, and that's what he's pointing out is one could have done that, one decided not to, one decided to play it safe and call him individual one. That doesn't mean, however, that the prosecutors don't consider him to be a co-conspirator or aren't at some point planning to call him a co-conspirator. There's no reason you have to come right out right now and say it, and in fact there might be good reasons you don't want to come right out and say it. And again, to point out who is a co-conspirator, usually for purposes of federal law, we simply are looking for agreement. You know, you agreed that a particular crime would be committed. You absolutely don't have to have committed all aspects of the crime. It is sufficient that you agreed.
What about, Rebecca, Michael Cohen's credibility here? Because, of course, the allegations are coming from him, somebody whom the president's legal teams tried to paint as a liar, basically. I wonder what prosecutors would do if they felt as though there was a credibility issue. I imagine they would not have gone forward unless they felt as though they had additional evidence to support the allegations he's making.
Yeah, Michael Cohen is a really terrible witness. I mean, prosecutors are used to using really terrible witnesses, but he's particularly bad, and that's why I think to have come out and said this on their own in a document to the court, that they really have some other evidence to suggest that that's so.
And, you know, the president himself is calling these payments a quote-unquote simple transaction, Miriam. Does that hold up as a legal defense here?
That's not going to hold up if there's, and there already seems to be evidence in the form of Mr. Cohen's own plea, and not only that, just the sort of factual scenario in which these payments occurred. the more that these payments appear to have something to do with the election, and they clearly, this is the timing of the payments, the way in which the payments were made, the way in which the payments were covered up, or at least the reimbursement seems to have been covered up. All of that is going to undermine a claim that, well, this is just a simple payment. I had some women accusing me of an affair, and I wanted this to go away.
Well, what about President Trump's argument, Rebecca, that his lawyer, Michael Cohen, is liable if he made a mistake, not the president? Does that hold up?
I think any one of these suggestions, is possible defense. I think the problem here is that President Trump is not acting like an innocent person. Innocent people tend to take one particular tack, and that's their one story, and they tend to stick to it. They tend to be very open with cooperating with prosecutors, and he has not acted that way, and it's become increasingly true. And I think every time he backs up and changes his story, it's sort of an indication that something is off.
I want to ask about, we only have about a minute left, but I'm curious what you both think about Congressman Adam Schiff's comments. He says the president could be the first in a long time to face the real prospect of jail time. What are your thoughts on that, Miriam?
So there are 2 points to make here. First of all, it seems unlikely that we would see an indictment of a sitting president. And so there are 2 ways in which we could see an indictment of Mr. Trump. One way is if he were impeached, then obviously he would no longer be president. There could be a possibility that as soon as that impeachment occurred, if he, for example, stepped down or if he was actually impeached, then we would see an indictment. Alternatively, the statute of limitations won't necessarily run on many of these crimes for 5 years from whenever they were complete. And in fact, to the extent you have ongoing obstruction, those crimes haven't run until to the extent it's a continuing offense. So in that sense, if he were voted, if there were no impeachment, but Mr. Trump were voted out of office in 2020, again, putting aside the potential pardon by another president, there's nothing that says that the prosecutors couldn't simply wait, and then as soon as Mr. Trump was no longer president, they could indict him if the statute of limitations had not run.
So, Rebecca, it sounds like the possibility does exist for the president to be indicted if, in fact, if you think about all those factors that were just laid out there by Miriam, they proceed after the president leaves office.
That's right. I mean, I think right now one's eyes should be on impeachment, though. I think that the political process is the process that really is going to work here. I mean, maybe he'll be indicted, maybe he won't be indicted, but the facts are, especially the obstruction case, is looking stronger and stronger. And that may lead, even if it doesn't lead to criminal charges, may lead to impeachment.
All right, Miriam Baer and Rebecca Roiphe, thank you both for joining us. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.